Ever imagine like a political thriller? You know where the whole thing comes down to like a legal battle over something that seems kind of boring, like candidate substitutions?
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would be a thriller.
No, but it totally happens. And that's what we're diving into today.
It's true. And believe me, this case, Aggabao and Navarro versus COMELEC, it's as wild as any fictional political drama.
For real, this 2022 Supreme Court decision really gives you a peek behind the curtain of how elections work here in the Philippines. It shows just how important the COMELEC's job is to make sure elections are fair and by the book.
Because when you really get down to it, this case is about way more than just who gets to be in charge.
Right.
Into those really big questions of due process and just how important it is for election officials to be crystal clear in their decisions and to act decisively.
You got it.
Yeah.
You know, our listeners requested a deep dive into this case, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're breaking down not just all the ins and outs of the case itself, but what it tells us about the bigger picture of elections in the Philippines.
We're going to dig into the legal arguments,
Uh.
what COMELEC did, and then the Supreme Court's decision, which was a pretty big deal.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We're in Santiago City, Isabela. It's the 2022 mayoral race. Things are heating up. It's one of those races where every single vote matters, and the outcome. Well, it all hinges on this really messy situation with candidates claiming they should be the one on the ballot.
Yeah, and at the center of it all are two people, both saying they're the rightful candidate for the same spot. For mayor,
Yeah.
and get this, both were seemingly endorsed by the same political party.
See, this isn't just some election that was too close to call. This goes deeper. This is about whether the election itself was legitimate. It makes you wonder how this even happens in the first place.
Exactly. It really makes you think about the role of these political parties, how important it is for them to have their own house in order, and what can happen when those controls fail. Could someone be taking advantage? Is it just confusion? It's a lot to unpack.
Okay, so to understand why this is such a big deal, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to when not one, but two CONAs showed up, each one looking like it had the official backing of the party.
And that's where Amelita Navarro and Christopher Asen come in. They're the ones who set off this chain reaction that ended up having a big impact on election law in the Philippines.
So first up, you've got Navarro. She's the first one to throw her hat in the ring, files her certificate of candidacy for mayor. She's running as the nominee for Partido Reporma. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, at first glance, everything looks good. All her paperwork is in order. She's got her CONA. That's that super important certificate of nomination and acceptance. It's basically the party giving her their official blessing. And her CONA. Signed by none other than the big man himself, Senator Panfilo Lacson, the party chairman.
Seems pretty airtight.
Right.
But that is when things take a turn. Enter Christopher Asen. He comes in and files his COC for mayor, too. And guess what? He's also saying he's the nominee for wait for it, Partido Reporma. Talk about a plot twist.
And it gets better. Asen, he is a CONA too, and it looks like Lacson signed his too. So now picture the COMELEC staring at these two candidates, both wanting to represent the same party, both with what looks like totally legit documents.
I would love to see the looks on their faces. What do you even do when you've got two people saying they're the one and only candidate, both with paperwork that seems official? Talk about a tough spot for the COMELEC.
Right. I mean, in the Philippines, the election code is really clear. Each party gets just one candidate for each position. So this isn't just some paperwork snafu. This is about making sure the whole election system is on solid ground.
Exactly. And as this whole thing plays out, it's that very integrity that's being questioned. Now, naturally, word gets out about this whole two CONA situation, and it gets back to Senator Lacson. And he finds himself in a pretty unique position. He's got to untangle this political mess. So he doesn't just, like, sit back and let COMELEC figure it out.
Oh, no. He takes charge. Lacson sends this letter to COMELEC, and it throws a real wrench in the works. He says straight up Asen's CONA. Doesn't mean a thing. Partido Reporma never nominated the guy. In fact, he says Asen's isn't even member.
Wow, putting him on blast. It makes you wonder how Asen even got that CONA to begin with. You know what's really interesting here is how this case starts out simple enough. Just got to verify who the party is backing. But then it exposes these potential weaknesses in the whole party system.
Couldn't agree more. If you think about the bigger picture, Lacson clearing things up is important, but it also shows how there could be issues or even manipulation within parties. Like maybe someone dropped the ball on the paperwork, or worse. It really underscores how crucial it is for parties to have strong internal controls from the get-go, to stop these situations before they even start.
Totally. And you can bet this is just the beginning. So we've got this whole tangled mess with the CONAs, but hold on tight. Because in another crazy turn of events, Navarro decides to drop out of the mayoral race. She's setting her sights on the vice mayor spot instead, changes her mind mid-race.
Which, hey, she's totally allowed to do.
Mm-mm.
But this seemingly simple decision just adds another layer of complexity to this already crazy situation. And remember, candidate substitutions. Those come with their own set of rules and deadlines. It's all in the election code.
Right. Makes sense. You can't just have people jumping in and out of races whenever they feel like
Yeah.
it. So what happens when Navarro withdraws? Does it just leave an empty slot? Or does someone take her place?
This is where our other petitioner, Aggabao, comes in. When Navarro backs out, she throws her support behind him to take over the mayoral race. So Aggabao, he does what he's got to do, files his COC, ready to fill those shoes, and you know what? He submits his CONA, signed by, guess who? Senator Laxon.
Okay, let me get this straight. We started with two candidates, both saying they were the chosen one from the same party. One's backed by the party leader, the other's left out in the cold. Then one jumps to a different race, and someone else steps in saying he's got the endorsement. My head's spinning.
And this is where the COMELEC's job gets really tough. Imagine being them. You're supposed to make sure this election is fair and by the book, but you've got conflicting stories, new filings coming in left and right. How do you even begin to figure out who the rightful candidate is?
Yeah, no kidding. So what did the COMELEC do when they were faced with this totally unprecedented situation? Did they, try to figure out if the CONAs were real? Did they call up Senator Laxon to get to the bottom of it, maybe bring everyone together for a good old-fashioned showdown? You'd think they'd have to do something dramatic, right,
Yeah.
with all this going on.
Well, get this. Their first move was kind of unexpected. Instead of, like you said, digging into those CONAs or getting Laxon on the phone, they decided to just work with what they had right in front of them.
So they just ignored the fact that Laxon said one of those CONAs was bogus.
It seems that way. They were basically like, okay, we'll get to that whole party endorsement mess later. For now, you two, you're both running as independents.
So they just sidestepped the whole party thing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it kind of makes sense on the surface. Seems like a practical way to deal with a really sticky situation. But this decision, it had some serious consequences, especially for Aggabao.
Because he was counting on Navarro being the official party pick. Right?
Exactly. See, the election code is really strict about substitutions. One of the big rules. Substitutions only fly if the original candidate was officially with the party. So when COMELEC took away Navarro's party affiliation, they accidentally kicked Aggabao out of the race too.
Wow, talk about a domino effect.
Tell me about it. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. It shows how all these rules are connected. Even if they seem totally separate, every decision has ripple effects, especially when you're talking about something as important as an election.
So basically, COMELEC tried to make things simpler, but they just made it worse. Poor Aggabao. Did he just accept that, or did he fight back?
Oh, Aggabao. He's not one to back down. He and Navarro took their case straight to the top, to the Supreme Court, and their argument. They said COMELEC violated their right to due process.
Because they didn't even get a chance to prove their case.
Exactly. And here's where the Supreme Court's decision gets really juicy. They agreed that, yeah, COMELEC has to accept documents that look official at first glance. But they had a problem with how COMELEC handled everything after that, especially after Laxon called out ASIN's CONA.
So they weren't saying COMELEC messed up by accepting those CONAs in the first place. They were saying COMELEC should have done more once things got complicated.
You got it. The Supreme Court basically said, look, when there's a dispute this obvious, you can't just shuffle papers. You got to put on your judge hat. You got to have a real hearing. Let everyone speak their piece, look at the evidence, and then decide whose CONA is legit. Figure out who the party actually chose.
Which makes total sense. How can you say things are fair and transparent if you're not even giving everyone a chance?
Exactly. This decision from the Supreme Court, it's a huge deal for the Philippines. It reinforces a really important principle. Due process is non-negotiable. It's about making sure things are fair and transparent and that everyone is held accountable. And that goes a long way in protecting the integrity of the entire election system.
Absolutely. So that's a win for Aggabao and Navarro. The highest court said COMELEC made a mistake, but did that change who won the election?
And here's where things get complicated. You see, by the time the Supreme Court made their decision, the election was over. Someone else, Sheena Tan, had already been declared the winner. The court could say, hey, COMELEC, you blew it. But they couldn't go back in time and make Aggabao the winner.
So even though Aggabao and Navarro were right, they lost their chance to run in a fair election, all because of some procedural errors and COMELEC's missteps?
Unfortunately, yeah. This case is a harsh reminder that sometimes justice delayed is justice denied. It shows how important it is to not only have clear rules, but to make sure the people in charge, like COMELEC, have what they need to handle these really complex situations. and to handle them quickly and effectively.
It's kind of a heavy thought to end on. This might be the end of the legal battle, but it leaves us with some big questions. What can we do as citizens to push for reforms that make our elections stronger and more reliable? How can we make sure that institutions like COMELEC have the tools and support they need to tackle these tough situations head-on and make sure everything is fair and square? These are things we should all be thinking about, no matter who you voted for.
Couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, it's not just about who wins and loses, it's about making sure that elections themselves are a true reflection of what people want. And that's something worth fighting for.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time.